The sun was setting over the vast plains of Wyoming, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air carried a slight chill as Ethan Calloway stood on the edge of his sprawling ranch, staring out at the horizon. His boots were caked with dirt from a long day's work, but he didn't mind. Work kept him busy, and being busy meant he didn't have time to think about the loneliness that had settled deep inside him. Ethan wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, he'd been happy, married to a woman who filled his life with laughter and warmth. But 5 years ago, tragedy struck when she died in a car accident. Since then, Ethan had thrown himself into running the Calloway Ranch, letting the cattle, horses, and endless fields become his only companions. He rarely went into town, avoided social gatherings, and spent most nights sitting alone in his quiet house, nursing a cup of coffee while staring out the window. That evening, though, something felt different. As Ethan checked the fence line near the far corner of his property, dark clouds began rolling in. A storm was brewing, and it looked like it would hit hard. Just as he turned back toward his truck, a flash of lightning illuminated something strange. A broken-down car parked awkwardly on the side of the dirt road leading to his land. Its hood was up, steam rising faintly from the engine. Curious, Ethan walked closer. Inside the car, he saw two figures huddled together, a woman holding a small boy tightly against her chest. They looked scared, cold, and completely out of place in the middle of nowhere. When Ethan tapped gently on the window, the woman jumped, startled. She rolled down the glass just enough to peek out, her eyes wide with both fear and relief. "You okay?" Ethan asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. The woman hesitated before answering. We're stuck," she said softly, glancing at the boy beside her. "Our car broke down and there's no cell service here. We didn't know what else to do." Ethan nodded, taking in their situation. The woman looked exhausted, her hair damp from the drizzle starting to fall. The little boy clung to her, his face pale but curious as he stared up at Ethan. Something about them tugged at him, even though he tried to push the feeling away. "What are you doing out here anyway?" Ethan asked, crossing his arms against the growing wind. "My name is Claire," the woman replied, her voice steadier now. "This is my son, Liam. We were driving cross-country, trying to get to a new start after everything. My husband passed away recently and I thought moving would help us heal. But then the car—" Her voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He knew all too well what loss felt like. For a moment, he considered telling them to wait until morning and flag down someone else for help. After all, he wasn't exactly known for being friendly or welcoming. But looking at the boy's tired face and the way Claire hugged him protectively, he couldn't bring himself to turn them away. "You can stay at the guest house tonight," Ethan said finally, surprising even himself. "It's nothing fancy, but it'll keep you dry until the storm passes." Claire's eyes widened in gratitude. "Thank you so much," she whispered. "I don't know what we would have done otherwise." Ethan shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Don't mention it, just follow me, I'll show you where to go." As they drove back to the main house in silence, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter might change things, for better or worse. He didn't realize just how much these strangers would come to mean to him in the days ahead. When they arrived, Ethan led Claire and Liam to the small guest house tucked behind the barn. It was cozy, with a fireplace, a couple of beds, and a kitchenette stocked with basic supplies. Claire thanked him again, her voice warm despite her obvious fatigue. Ethan muttered something about checking on them in the morning before heading back to his own house. That night, as the storm raged outside, Ethan sat by his window, staring at the faint glow coming from the guest house. He told himself he was just being neighborly, offering shelter to people in need. But deep down he wondered if maybe, just maybe, this unexpected intrusion into his solitary world might be exactly what he needed. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the storm having passed in the night. Ethan woke early, as he always did, to tend to his cattle. He moved through the routine with practiced ease, feeding the animals, checking fences, and making sure everything was running smoothly. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on the work, His mind kept drifting back to the guest house. Claire and Liam were still there. Ethan wasn't used to having people around, especially not strangers who'd shown up out of nowhere. He told himself it was only temporary. They'd fix their car, move on, and things would go back to normal. Still, he couldn't shake the image of the boy's wide-eyed curiosity or the way Claire had looked at him with quiet gratitude. It made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. By mid-morning, Ethan decided to check on them. He grabbed a toolbox from the barn, figuring he could at least take a look at their car and see if anything obvious was wrong. When he knocked on the door of the guest house, it opened slowly, revealing Claire. She looked more rested than she had the night before, though her clothes were still wrinkled and her hair was tied back in a messy bun. "Good morning," she said, offering a small smile. "I was just about to make some coffee. Would you like a cup?" Ethan hesitated. Coffee? With her? That seemed too personal, too close. But then again, turning down an offer of hospitality felt rude, so he nodded. "Sure, thanks." Inside, the guest house was warm and inviting, despite its simplicity. Liam sat at the tiny kitchen table coloring in a worn notebook with crayons. He looked up when Ethan entered, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "Hey, mister!" the boy exclaimed, waving a blue crayon. "You want to see my picture? It's a horse." Ethan chuckled despite himself. "A horse, huh? Let me guess, it's one of mine?" Liam nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah. You've got lots of horses, right? Can I ride one sometime?" Before Ethan could answer, Claire stepped in, handing him a steaming mug of coffee. "Sorry about that. He's full of questions." "It's fine," Ethan replied, taking a sip of the coffee. It was strong but good, the kind that warmed you all the way down. "Kids are supposed to ask questions." Claire raised an eyebrow, surprised by his comment. "Not many people think that way these days." Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable under her gaze. "Well, maybe they should." For a moment, the three of them sat in silence, Ethan sipping his coffee, Claire watching him carefully, and Liam going back to his drawing. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "So about your car. I brought some tools to take a look. If it's something simple, I might be able to fix it myself. Otherwise, I can call someone from town." Claire's face softened with relief. "That would be amazing. I don't even know where to start with something like that." After finishing his coffee, Ethan headed outside with Claire following closely behind. Together, they popped the hood of the old sedan, revealing a mess of wires and hoses. Ethan inspected it methodically, muttering to himself as he worked. Claire stood nearby, arms crossed against the cool breeze, occasionally asking if there was anything she could do to help. "You're really good at this," she said after a while, breaking the silence. "Fixing things, I mean." Ethan glanced at her, surprised by the compliment. "It's just part of ranch life. You learn to handle whatever comes your way." "I wish I knew how to do stuff like that," Claire admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. "Life would have been easier if I had." Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he tightened a loose bolt and wiped his hands on a rag before speaking. "You seem pretty capable to me. Getting yourself and your son across the country isn't easy." Claire smiled faintly, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Starting over is harder than I thought it would be." Ethan didn't say anything, but her words stayed with him. He understood what it meant to start over, or at least try to. After losing his wife, he'd buried himself in work, hoping the pain would fade. But it never really did. Maybe that's why he found himself drawn to Claire, not because she reminded him of his own struggles, but because she was determined to keep moving forward despite hers. By late afternoon, Ethan managed to get the car running again. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold until they reached the nearest mechanic. As Claire thanked him profusely, Ethan waved her off, saying it was no big deal. But inside, he felt a pang of disappointment. Once the car was fixed, they'd leave. And then what? Over the next few days, Claire and Liam stayed on the ranch while waiting for parts to arrive for the car. During that time, Ethan found himself spending more time with them than he'd expected. Liam followed him everywhere, peppering him with endless questions about cows, tractors, and horses. At first, Ethan found it annoying. Kids weren't exactly his thing, but the boy's enthusiasm was infectious. Before long, Ethan found himself teaching Liam how to groom the horses and explaining the basics of ranching. Claire, meanwhile, pitched in wherever she could. She helped clean the stables, cooked meals, and even organized the cluttered office Ethan had neglected for years. Her presence brought a sense of order and warmth to the ranch that Ethan hadn't realized was missing. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel so empty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan, Claire, and Liam sat together on the porch, sharing a meal Claire had prepared. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and stories. Liam talked excitedly about riding a horse someday, while Claire shared bits and pieces of her journey across the country. Ethan listened quietly, content to let them fill the silence. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Claire turned to Ethan with a thoughtful expression. "Thank you for letting us stay here. I know we must be disrupting your routine." Ethan shook his head. "You're not disrupting anything. Truth is, it's kinda nice having company for once." Claire smiled, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before she looked away. There was something unspoken between them, a connection neither fully understood yet. But for now, it was enough to simply enjoy each other's company. As the night grew cooler, they retreated indoors, leaving the porch light on. Ethan lingered outside for a moment longer, staring up at the vast Wyoming sky. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope, a feeling he hadn't dared to acknowledge since his wife's passing. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. Claire and Liam had already changed his life in ways he couldn't have imagined. The days passed quickly, almost too quickly for Ethan's liking. With each sunrise, the bond between him, Claire, and Liam grew stronger. The ranch, once a place of solitude and quiet routine, now buzzed with life. Claire's laughter echoed. Through the house, Liam's endless questions filled the air, and even the animals seemed livelier, as if they sensed the shift in energy. For the first time in years, Ethan found himself looking forward to mornings, not just because of the work, but because of the people who were slowly becoming part of his world. But as much as Ethan enjoyed having them around, he couldn't ignore the nagging voice in the back of his mind. What was he doing? He wasn't the kind of man who opened his home or his heart to others. He'd spent so long building walls around himself, convincing himself that it was safer that way. Yet here he was, letting Claire and Liam slip past those defenses without even realizing how it had happened. One afternoon, while Ethan was fixing a broken fence near the far pasture, Claire joined him. She carried a basket filled with sandwiches and thermoses of lemonade, insisting they take a break together. Ethan hesitated at first. Working alone was second nature to him, but eventually relented. They sat under the shade of an old oak tree, the breeze carrying the faint scent of wildflowers. "You've been working too hard," Claire said, handing him a sandwich. "Even someone as tough as you needs to rest sometimes." Ethan smirked, taking a bite. "I'm fine, work keeps me busy." Claire tilted her head, studying him. "Busy isn't always the same as happy, though." Her words caught him off guard. He chewed slowly, avoiding her gaze. "What makes you think I'm not happy?" She shrugged, brushing crumbs from her lap. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but I can see it, you know. You've got this weight on your shoulders, like you're carrying something heavy." Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared out at the horizon where the field stretched endlessly toward the mountains. Finally, he sighed. "Some things are easier to carry alone." Claire nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. "I get that. Believe me, I do. But carrying things alone doesn't mean you have to keep doing it forever." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant moo of cows. Then Ethan turned to her, his expression softening. "Why are you so good at reading people?" Claire laughed softly. "Let's just say I've had plenty of practice. When you lose someone you love, you learn to pay attention to the little things, the silences, the looks, the way someone holds themselves. Pain has a way of showing up, whether we want it to or not. Ethan looked down at his hands, calloused from years of labor. Her words struck a chord deep within him. He'd spent so long trying to hide his pain, to bury it beneath layers of work and isolation. But Claire saw through all of that. She saw him, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain, that scared him. Later that week, tensions began to surface. A letter arrived in the mail addressed to Claire. At first, she tried to hide it, tucking it into her pocket without opening it. But Ethan noticed the way her smile faltered when she thought no one was looking. That evening, after Liam went to bed, Ethan confronted her. "What's going on?" he asked gently, finding her sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at the crumpled envelope. Claire hesitated, then sighed. "It's nothing, just some bills I forgot about." Ethan frowned, pulling out a chair to sit across from her. "Bills? From before?" She nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the envelope. "My husband left behind some debts. I didn't know about them until recently. Debt collectors have been sending letters, calling. It's overwhelming." Ethan leaned back, processing what she'd said. "How much are we talking about?" "Enough to make starting over feel impossible," Claire admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought moving would help, but it turns out running away doesn't solve anything." Ethan reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. "You're not alone in this. Let me help." Claire pulled her hand away, shaking her head. "No, I can't ask you to do that. You've already done so much for us." "It's not asking," Ethan insisted. "I'm offering. I have the means and I want to help." But Claire refused, her pride getting in the way. "I appreciate it, I really do. But I need to figure this out on my own. Taking your money would feel wrong." Ethan clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling up inside him. Why did she have to be so stubborn? Didn't she realize he wanted to help because he cared? But instead of arguing further, he backed off, knowing she needed space to process everything. The tension lingered between them over the next few days. Claire threw herself into chores, working longer hours than usual, while Ethan retreated into himself, unsure of how to bridge the gap between them. Meanwhile, Liam remained blissfully unaware of the strain, continuing to bounce happily between the two adults like a ray of sunshine. Things came to a head one evening when rumors from town reached Claire's ears. A local shopkeeper mentioned, hearing whispers about her and Ethan, that she was using him for his wealth, that she'd planned this whole thing to take advantage of his kindness. Though Claire knew the gossip wasn't true, it stung all the same. That night she confronted Ethan in the barn, her face flushed with emotion. "People are talking, Ethan. They think I'm here because of your money. Is that what you think, too?" Ethan looked taken aback. "Of course not. Where is this coming from?" "I heard it in town today," Claire snapped, pacing back and forth. "Everyone seems to have an opinion about us, about me. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am imposing. Maybe I should leave." "Leave?" Ethan repeated, stepping closer. "You can't seriously believe any of that nonsense." "Why shouldn't I?" Claire shot back. "This isn't my life. This is yours. I don't belong here." "Yes, you do," Ethan said firmly, his voice rising. "You and Liam, you've brought something to this place that's been missing for years. Don't you see that?" Claire froze, tears welling up in her eyes. "And what happens when the debt collectors come knocking again? Or when Liam starts asking why we're living on someone else's charity? What then?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "It's not charity. I care about you, both of you. Can't you understand that?" Claire blinked, caught off guard by his admission. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The silence hung heavy between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Finally, Claire whispered, "I care about you too, more than I should. But caring isn't enough, Ethan. Not when there's so much uncertainty." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the dimly lit barn. His chest tightened with a mix of anger, sadness, and fear. Fear that she might actually leave. Fear that he'd let another chance at happiness slip through his fingers. As the days passed, the rift between them widened. Claire kept her distance, focusing on preparing for their departure once the car was fixed. Ethan, meanwhile, threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the ache in his chest. But no amount of physical labor could dull the pain of knowing she might soon be gone for good. One evening, as Ethan sat on the porch watching the sunset, Liam appeared beside him, clutching a toy horse. "Are you sad, mister?" the boy asked innocently. Ethan forced a smile. "Nah, buddy, just thinking." "About Mommy?" Liam pressed, climbing onto the bench next to him. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, about your mom." Liam frowned, kicking his feet against the wooden slats. "Don't be sad. She likes you, a lot." Ethan chuckled despite himself. "Does she tell you that?" "Nope," Liam said matter-of-factly. "But I can tell. She smiles more when you're around." Those simple words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He ruffled Liam's hair affectionately, feeling a surge of determination. He wasn't going to let Claire walk away, not without a fight. The tension between Ethan and Claire had reached a breaking point. For days they moved around each other like strangers, exchanging only the bare minimum of words. The warmth that had once filled the ranch seemed to have vanished, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that lingered in every corner of the house. Ethan tried to focus on work, throwing himself into fixing fences, feeding cattle, and repairing equipment. But no amount of physical labor could drown out the ache in his chest. Every time he passed the guest house or caught a glimpse of Claire, walking across the yard, he felt the weight of what was slipping away. Claire, too, was struggling. She spent her days helping with chores and keeping Liam occupied, but her mind was elsewhere. The letter from the debt collectors weighed heavily on her, as did the rumors she'd overheard in town. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was imposing on Ethan, taking advantage of his kindness when she had nothing to offer in return. Her pride kept her from accepting his help, even though she desperately needed it. And yet, despite everything, she couldn't deny the connection she felt with him, a connection that terrified her because it made her want to stay. One morning, as the sun rose over the plains, Claire made a decision. It was time to leave. She packed their belongings quietly, careful not to wake Liam, who was still asleep in the guest house. As she folded clothes and tucked toys into a worn suitcase, tears streamed down her face. Leaving wasn't easy. This place had become more of a home than anywhere else she'd been in years, but she convinced herself it was for the best. For Ethan's sake as much as hers. When Liam woke up, Claire forced a smile. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, brushing his hair back. "We're going on another adventure today." Liam blinked sleepily, confused. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere new," Claire replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Remember how we talked about starting fresh? Well, this is part of it." Liam frowned, sensing something was off. "But I like it here. Can't we stay?" Claire hugged him, tightly, blinking back tears. "I wish we could, sweetheart. But sometimes we have to keep moving. You'll see. It'll be okay." By mid-morning, their bags were packed, and the car was ready to go. Claire stood outside the guest house, staring at the ranch one last time. Her heart ached at the thought of leaving behind the peace she'd found here, and the man who had unknowingly started to heal her broken spirit. Taking a deep breath, she turned toward the main house, intending to thank Ethan one final time before driving away. But before she could knock on the door, Ethan appeared on the porch, his boots scuffed and his hat pulled low over his eyes. He looked surprised to see her standing there with suitcases in hand. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. "We're leaving," Claire said simply, avoiding his gaze. "I got a job offer in the next town over. It's not much, but it'll be enough to get us by." Ethan's jaw tightened and he stepped closer. "You're running again." "It's not running," Claire shot back, her voice rising. "It's survival. We can't keep relying on you, Ethan. This isn't our life, it's yours. And I can't let myself depend on someone else after everything I've been through." "You're not depending on me," Ethan argued, his frustration evident. "I'm offering. There's a difference." But I don't want to take your help, Claire snapped, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Don't you understand? I need to do this on my own. I can't lose myself completely just because. Because of what? Ethan demanded, stepping even closer. Because you care about me? Because I care about you? Claire froze, her breath catching in her throat. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she looked away, hugging her arms tightly around herself. Ethan sighed, his anger melting into something softer, something raw and vulnerable. Claire, listen to me. I've spent 5 years pushing people away because I was afraid of getting hurt again, afraid of losing them. But then you and Liam showed up, and for the first time since my wife died, I feel alive. I feel like maybe there's a reason to keep going. Don't walk away from that, please. Claire shook her head, tears streaming freely now. It's not that simple, Ethan. My life isn't fixed just because I met you. I have debts, responsibilities, a son who deserves stability. What happens if things don't work out between us? What happens if I fail again? Ethan reached out, gently tilting her chin so she had to meet his eyes. Then we figure it out together. Life doesn't come with guarantees, Claire. All we can do is try, and I want to try. With you. For a moment they stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Claire wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this could work, but fear held her back, whispering cruel reminders of all the ways love could go wrong. Finally, she whispered, I can't promise anything. I'm not asking for promises, Ethan replied, his voice steady. Just give me a chance, that's all I'm asking. Claire hesitated, torn between her instincts and her heart. Behind her, Liam tugged on her sleeve, looking up at her, with wide, hopeful eyes. Mommy, can't we stay a little longer, please? The plea broke her resolve. With a shaky sigh, Claire nodded. Okay, she murmured. We'll stay for now. Relief washed over Ethan's face and he exhaled deeply, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. Thank you, he said softly, pulling her into a tentative hug. Claire stiffened, at first, but then she relaxed, leaning into his embrace. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel safe, to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could work out. Over the next few days, the atmosphere on the ranch shifted. Claire and Ethan worked side by side, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been strained. They talked openly about their fears and hopes, sharing pieces of themselves they'd kept hidden for years. Claire admitted how scared she was of failing Liam, while Ethan confessed how lonely he'd been before they arrived. Their conversations weren't always easy, but they brought them closer, laying the foundation for something real. Liam, meanwhile, thrived under Ethan's guidance. Together, they explored the ranch, learning about the animals and practicing basic chores. One afternoon, Ethan taught Liam how to ride a gentle mare named Daisy. The boy squealed with delight as they trotted around the paddock, his laughter echoing across the fields. Watching them from the porch, Claire felt a pang of gratitude and hope. As the days turned into weeks, Claire began to imagine a future where she and Liam stayed on the ranch permanently. It wasn't perfect. They still had challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, she dared to dream of happiness. Ethan, too, found himself envisioning a life with Claire and Liam by his side. He realized he didn't just want them to stay. He needed them. One evening, as the three of them sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan turned to Claire with a question that had been weighing on his mind. Do you think Liam would ever consider calling me Dad? Claire smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I think he already does, in his heart. Ethan nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. For so long, he'd believed he wasn't meant to be a father again. But seeing Liam laugh, grow, and trust him had changed everything. He knew now that family wasn't just about blood. It was about love, commitment, and choosing to stand together no matter what. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Ethan reached over and took Claire's hand in his. She squeezed it gently, her smile soft but full of meaning. In that moment, surrounded by the vast Wyoming plains and the quiet hum of nature, they both knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. The days that followed were a mix of uncertainty and hope. Claire and Ethan had agreed to take things slowly, working through their fears and doubts together. But old habits die hard, and both of them struggled with trusting this fragile new connection they were building. For Claire, it was the fear of leaning too heavily on Ethan, of losing her independence and becoming someone she didn't recognize. For Ethan, it was the fear of opening himself up again, of letting someone in only to face heartbreak once more. Still, they kept showing up for each other, day by day, step by step. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan woke early as usual. But instead of heading straight to the barn, he paused outside the guest house. Through the window, he could see Claire moving around the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. The sight made him smile, a small private moment of joy he hadn't felt in years. He knocked lightly on the door, and when Claire opened it, she greeted him with a warm smile that seemed to light up the room. "Morning," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Coffee's almost ready." Ethan nodded, removing his hat as he entered. The guest house had started to feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a second home, or maybe even the home, for all three of them. Liam was already seated at the table, munching on toast while flipping through a picture book about farm animals. When he saw Ethan, his face lit up. "Hey, Dad," Liam exclaimed, waving enthusiastically. Ethan froze mid-step, caught off guard by the word. It wasn't the first time Liam had called him that. It had happened casually a few times before, but hearing it now, in this moment, hit him differently. He glanced at Claire, who bit her lip to hide a grin. "Sorry," she said quietly, though. Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "He's been practicing." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head as he ruffled Liam's hair. "No need to apologize. I kinda like it." Liam beamed, clearly proud of himself. "I told Mommy you're gonna be my dad someday." Claire blushed, turning back to the stove to hide her reaction. Ethan cleared his throat, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Well, we'll see about that, buddy. One thing at a time." But deep down, Ethan's heart swelled with emotion. The idea of being a father again, of stepping into that role for Liam, felt both terrifying and exhilarating. He knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and plenty of adjustments. Yet looking at the boy's bright eyes and infectious enthusiasm, he couldn't imagine walking away from this chance to build something meaningful. Later that afternoon, Ethan decided to tackle a project he'd been putting off for months, clearing out the old storage shed near the main house. Over the years, it had become a dumping ground for forgotten tools, broken equipment, and dusty boxes of memorabilia left behind by his parents. As he sorted through the clutter, memories came flooding back, some happy, some painful. He found an old photo album tucked away in a corner, its pages yellowed with age. Flipping through it, he saw pictures of his childhood, his teenage years, and eventually, his marriage. Staring at those images, he felt a wave of nostalgia and sadness. Claire appeared in the doorway just as he was closing the album. She hesitated, unsure if she should interrupt. "Need a hand?" she asked, finally gesturing toward the mess. Ethan shrugged, setting the album aside. "Sure, why not?" Together they worked in companionable silence, sorting items into piles. Keep, donate, or toss. Claire handled the lighter objects while Ethan hauled heavier pieces outside. At one point, she pulled out a wooden rocking horse, its paint chipped but still charming. "This is adorable," she said, brushing off the dust. "Did you have this as a kid?" Ethan nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, my dad made it for me when I was little. Used to ride it all over the house until the legs gave out." Claire ran her fingers along the smooth surface, imagining a young Ethan playing with it. "You should fix it up. Liam would love it." Ethan considered the suggestion, then nodded. "Maybe I will. Could use a good sanding and some fresh paint." They continued working. Claire noticed how careful Ethan was with certain items: a worn baseball glove, a framed certificate from his high school rodeo team, a stack of letters tied with ribbon. Each object told a story, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the rugged exterior. By the time they finished, the shed looked almost unrecognizable. Clean, organized, and full of potential. "You did good," Claire said, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Feels like a fresh start." Ethan glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, maybe it does." That evening, after dinner, Claire took Ethan aside under the pretense of needing help with something. Instead, she led him to the barn, where she'd set up a makeshift surprise. A blanket was spread across the hay bales, surrounded by lanterns casting a soft glow. In the center sat a small cake, its frosting lopsided, but clearly homemade. "What's all this?" Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's for you," Claire replied, smiling sheepishly. "A thank you for everything. For letting us stay, for helping us, for being you." Ethan shook his head, laughing softly. "You don't have to thank me, Claire. This isn't charity. You belong here." Her smile faltered slightly, and she looked down at her hands. "Do I? Sometimes I wonder if I'm just holding on to something that isn't real, something that won't last." Ethan stepped closer, tilting her chin so she had to meet his gaze. "It's real, and it'll last, if we make it last. Together." Tears welled up in Claire's eyes, but she blinked them away, nodding. "Okay, together." They sat down on the blanket, sharing slices of cake and talking late into the night. Claire opened up about her dreams for the future, not just for herself but for Liam. She wanted him to grow up surrounded by love, stability, and opportunities. Ethan listened intently, nodding along as she spoke. When it was his turn to share, Ethan admitted something he'd never told anyone before. "I used to think I'd lost my chance at happiness, that life was done with me after my wife passed. But meeting you, it made me realize I still have a lot to give. I want to be the person you can count on, the person Liam can look up to." Claire reached out, taking his hand in hers. "You already are." The next morning, Ethan woke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. After feeding the cattle and checking the fences, he drove into town, leaving Claire and Liam behind with instructions to stay busy. When he returned later that afternoon, he carried a large wooden crate filled with supplies. "What's this?" Claire asked, eyeing the box curiously. "Something for you," Ethan replied, grinning. "Open it." Inside, Claire found paints, brushes, canvases, and sketchbooks. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Ethan, what is this?" "I remember you mentioning once that you used to draw," he explained. "Thought maybe it's time you picked it up again. Who knows? Maybe you'll discover something new about yourself." Claire hugged him tightly, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Thank you, really. This means so much." Over the next few weeks, Claire spent hours painting, rediscovering a passion she'd long forgotten. Her artwork began popping up around the ranch. Landscapes of the Wyoming plains, portraits of Liam, and even a few sketches of Ethan. Watching her create brought a sense of fulfillment to their lives that neither had anticipated. Meanwhile, Ethan threw himself into fixing up the old rocking horse. With Liam's help, he sanded down the wood, applied fresh coats of paint, and reinforced the legs. When it was finally finished, Liam squealed with delight, hopping onto it immediately and pretending to gallop around the living room. Seeing the joy on Liam's face and the pride in Claire's, Ethan felt a surge of gratitude. Slowly but surely they were becoming a family, not because of obligation or convenience, but because they chose each other. And in that choice, they found strength, love, and hope for the future. As winter approached, bringing cooler temperatures and golden sunsets, Ethan knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone. The weeks turned into months, and the ranch began to feel like a completely different place. It wasn't just the fresh coat of paint on the barn or the newly planted flower beds that Claire had added. It was the life that now filled every corner. The laughter of a child echoed through the fields. The smell of home-cooked meals wafted from the kitchen, and the quiet hum of conversation replaced the silence that had once lingered in the house. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so content. or so alive. Claire had settled into her role on the ranch with ease, balancing her artistic pursuits with helping manage the day-to-day operations. She kept the books organized, handled orders for supplies, and even started brainstorming ways to modernize parts of the business. Her sharp mind and practical approach impressed Ethan, but what touched him most was how naturally she fit into his world, as if she'd always been meant to be there. Liam, meanwhile, thrived under Ethan's guidance. He learned to ride horses, care for the animals, and understand the rhythms of ranch life. Every evening he would run up to Ethan after finishing his chores, eager to share stories about his day. "Dad, guess what? I fed Daisy all by myself today," he'd announce proudly, using the word dad without hesitation now. Each time Ethan heard it, his heart swelled with pride and gratitude. One crisp November morning, Ethan woke early as usual, but instead of heading straight to work, he lingered on the porch watching the sunrise. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and frost. Inside, Claire was already awake, sipping coffee while sketching at the kitchen table. When she noticed him standing outside, she joined him, wrapping herself in a thick sweater. "Thinking about something?" she asked softly, leaning against the railing beside him. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, about us." Claire raised an eyebrow, curious. "What about us?" He turned to face her, his expression serious yet tender. "I've been thinking about the future, about what we want, what you want." Claire tilted her head, studying him. "You know what I want. I want this. Us. But I'm scared too, scared of messing it up." "You won't," Ethan said firmly. "And neither will I. We'll figure it out together. That's what families do." Claire smiled, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Families, huh? Is that what we are now?" Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. "If you'll have me." Her breath caught, and for a moment she simply stared at him, searching his eyes for reassurance. Then she nodded, her smile widening. "Of course I will." Later that week, Ethan made a decision. He drove into town, leaving Claire and Liam behind with vague promises of returning soon. When he came back, he carried a small wooden box tucked under his arm. Claire noticed immediately, her curiosity piqued. "What's that?" she asked, eyeing the box suspiciously. "Something important," Ethan replied, setting it down on the kitchen table. "But first, where's Liam?" "He's playing outside with Daisy," Claire answered, glancing toward the window. "Why?" Ethan grinned mischievously. "Go get him. This is for both of you." Claire frowned but did as he asked, calling Liam inside. The boy bounded through the door, his cheeks flushed from the cold. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between Ethan and Claire. Ethan knelt down to Liam's level, opening the wooden box to reveal two items, a shiny silver band and a smaller ring shaped like a horseshoe. Liam's eyes widened in awe. "Whoa, are those rings?" "They sure are," Ethan said, smiling. "One's for your mom, and one's for you." "For me?" Liam repeated, confused. "Yes," Ethan replied, slipping the horseshoe ring onto Liam's finger. "This means you're officially part of my family now, my son." Liam gasped, his face lighting up with excitement. "Does that mean I can call you Dad forever?" Ethan chuckled, pulling the boy into a tight hug. "Yes, buddy. Forever." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she watched the scene unfold. When Ethan stood up and turned to her, holding the silver band, her heart skipped a beat. "Claire," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I never thought I'd find love again, not after losing my wife. But then you walked into my life and everything changed. You showed me that love isn't just about finding someone. It's about building something together. Something real, something lasting. So, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and being a father to Liam?" Claire didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." The wedding took place several weeks later on a bright autumn afternoon. The ceremony was simple yet beautiful, held in the middle of the ranch with the golden prairie stretching endlessly behind them. Friends from town, neighbors, and even a few distant relatives gathered to celebrate, but the true focus was on the three people standing at the center: Ethan, Claire, and Liam. As they exchanged vows, Ethan's voice cracked with emotion when he promised to cherish Claire and protect their family. Claire, too, struggled to hold back tears as she pledged her love and commitment. And when it came time for Liam to present the rings, he marched proudly up to the altar, holding them high above his head like a trophy. After the ceremony, everyone gathered for a feast under twinkling string lights. There was music, laughter, and plenty of dancing. Claire and Ethan shared their first dance as husband and wife, swaying slowly to a country song that seemed written just for them. As they moved across the makeshift dance floor, Ethan whispered in her ear, "Thank you for saying yes." Claire smiled, resting her head against his chest. "Thank you for asking." That night, as the celebration wound down, Ethan, Claire, and Liam sat together on the porch, watching the stars twinkle above the plains. The air was cool, but the warmth of the day still lingered in their hearts. "You know," Claire said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "when we first arrived here, I never imagined any of this would happen. I thought we were just passing through." Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them." Liam yawned, snuggling against Claire's side. "Can we stay here forever?" Ethan chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Forever sounds about right." As they sat there, surrounded by the vast Wyoming sky and the quiet hum of nature, they knew they had found exactly where they belonged. Together, they had built a new beginning, a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. And, as long as they had each other, they knew they could face whatever the future held. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly whole. He wasn't just a lonely rancher anymore. He was a husband, a father, and part of a family, and nothing, not loss, fear, or doubt, could ever take that away from him.